Welcome to part 2 of my investing terms video. We're going to continue off the same scenario I was speaking of in my investing terms part 1 video, which discussed NOI, cap rate, and cash on cash. As a refresher of what the details were in regards to the property, we're looking at a $2 million income property that made $150,000 NOI. We figured the cap rate was 7.5%, and that if we used leverage, our cash on cash return jumped to 8.775%. Now we're going to get into the two more complex formulas. I'll do my best to explain them as simple as possible. The first one we're going to go over is called internal rate of return, or IRR. The second is called net present value, or NPV. Both of these can correlate with each other quite often, but let's take them one at a time, okay? By the way, there are software calculators and Excel programs that you can use to verify my calculations. Because of the complexity of the IRR and NPV formulas and the time it would take to redundantly explain it on a video, let's save the technicalities for a different time, shall we? First, the IRR concept. Let's take a look at that same $2 million property that makes $150,000 a year. We already know it has a 7.5% cap rate, and we've seen the additional potential it can make using leverage. And it's fairly easy to see how we can compare these to a bank account, right? So let's keep using the bank account example. Let's go back and say we give the bank $2 million all cash, and in return we make $150,000 a year. Then let's say after 3 years or so of collecting 7.5% of our money, we decide to leave the bank and do something else. We go to the bank and request a withdrawal of our $2 million, and instead of them only giving us $2 million after 3 years, they give us back $4 million. Double what we put in there. Now wait. We've been making 7.5% this whole time, but at the end of our 3rd year, we doubled our money, plus the other 2 years, 7.5%. Wait, so how much did I make overall? This is exactly where the internal rate of return comes in. Internal rate of return is basically looking at the investment overall from start to finish. And the key word there is finish, because there must be an exit strategy. And then determining how and what percentage you made. So let's look at our property. $2 million to buy it all cash, $150,000 for 3 years, and then at the end of the 3rd year, there's a huge bonus of $4 million. Using IRR, we've made 32.1%. As I explained, without getting all technical and wasting your time with the mathematics and how it works out, our money is made 32.1% every year from start to finish. And again, the key word there is finish. To make sure you're still with me and you know how to keep the 4 terms discussed so far, let's do a quick recap. NOI, which is short for net operating income, is the income you make after all expenses except the mortgage principal and interest. And as a side note, remember that you have to deduct taxes and insurance before you calculate the NOI. Next is the quick snapshot of an investment's potential, the cap rate. To keep the formula simple, just remember IRV, which is short for income over rate equals value. The NOI and cap rate go together to make a quick snapshot judgment of a property's potential. Next was the cash on cash. This is similar, but a more accurate depiction than the cap rate concept, since it takes into consideration all the other expenses, such as principal and interest on a mortgage. The cash on cash formula is much more suited for investors who want to know how much they are likely to make on a yearly income of a property. After cash on cash, we have the overall formula of IRR, or internal rate of return. If you need help remembering this one, just remember there has to be that big bonus or exit strategy at the end in order to make the IRR formula work. Which brings us finally to net present value, or NPV. Net present value means to convert all the future cash flows into today's dollars, which even for me is still a bit of a confusing way to understand it. Let's go back to the bank example we just left. Here you are sitting at the table with a good investor friend of yours. You tell your friend all the details of what just happened the last 3 years. How you gave the bank $2 million and they gave you back $150,000 every year for 3 years. Then how after 3 years you went to go take out your $2 million and instead they gave you $4 million. Your good investor friend explains everything about the internal rate of return and basically how much money you just made year after year. While you guys are talking, he or she asks you, well, how much were you okay with making? Kind of an odd question, but a valid one. As an investor, you have to know how much you're comfortable with making. This is discussed more in my determining net present value video. For the sake of argument, let's say you tell your friend you are more than comfortable making 20% and that over 32% was great, but much, much higher than you originally expected. What you can do now is determine the net present value. If you could go back in time and see what you would have made per year and what you would have made when you came to take your money out the bank, how much could you have paid in the beginning and still have made that 20%? Well, let's look at our property in the same fashion. Making $150,000 a year and you make $4 million at the end of 3 years, how much could you have paid and still made 20% IRR? After plugging in a few numbers, the amount is a difference of $630,787. In other words, if you had paid the original $2 million plus an additional $630,000, your new IRR will be 20%, right at the percentage you were comfortable with. Now, at this point, you may be asking why you would need this information. Well, for a few reasons. Let's say you're looking at a property and there are a lot of interested buyers and of course multiple offers. Obviously, there can only be one buyer. By knowing your desired NPV and plugging it in your formula, you can see how high would be your maximum to where you'd still make your desired return. This works in the opposite manner. If you're looking at the same property and your NPV target was 35%, you would be finding out how much less you had to pay for the property to still hit your target. Remember that if you're looking for a quick judgment snapshot, think of IRR for your cap rate formula. If you're looking to hold a property for a while and want to figure out what you're making even after all expenses, even if you have a loan, use your cash on cash formula. If you want to know the true value of your investment from start to finish, think internal rate of return. And if you're trying to find out the difference of what you need to accomplish to hit that target IRR, think of net present value. Of course, there's a few more formulas out there in the investment world, but when it comes to the income properties, these will definitely get you a leg up in determining what your investment is really worth. Now that's good to know.